In the same way in which Governor Kasich reacted to the Toledo water crisis, do you believe it would have made a significant difference to human health and safety in regards to the drinking water situation in Flint, Michigan?
I do.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. I have a few more questions I'd like to go through. Ms. Hedman, you have cited repeatedly how urgent it was and how important it is. We spent, over the course of 3 days, a transcribed interview with Mr. Dan Wyant. Do you know who he is?
Yes, he was the director of MDEQ.
When did you have the first conversation with him about the concerns of what's going on in Flint, Michigan?
I know from checking my records that I definitely had a conversation with him on September 15th, right before I had a conversation with the mayor. I believe I also had a shorter conversation with him on September 1st as part of a commissioner's roundtable.
At least according to Mr. Wyant, and it's a little while ago, his first conversation with you was September 27th. Now, whether it's the 15th or the 27th, can you see the concern that it took that long before you actually talked to the person who's in charge of the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality? What the heck are you doing if you're not calling him?
So again, I believe I also talked with him on the 1st. But
okay, September 1st. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give you a little latitude there. I don't believe you because I don't see any reason to trust you. But let's assume that that's true for a second. Why did it take so long?
My staff was reporting that...
So it was your staff's fault?
No. That Michigan was taking the required action, that Michigan was reporting that there was going to be a public information campaign, and if Michigan staff had said we will not issue the order that EPA has requested, then I would have gone directly to the director.
But they didn't, did they?
They did on August 17th.
So this is the fundamental problem with government, big government. It's, oh, well, we'll delegate this, and we'll have it, instead of just picking up the phone and talking to somebody and having a discussion with them. They have these emails here, for instance. This one is dated October 1st, where he was led to believe that you actually supported what they were doing. And this is the communication back and forth that Mr. Edwards talks about, where they're led to believe that they were actually in compliance. In fact, it's later on, even in November, when the EPA admits that the lead and copper rule is ambiguous. It's just, there's not clarity there. They admit that. It's your own internal email. Mr. Edwards, can you comment on this? And you've been so good at giving a perspective on all this, but for those that don't know how to read these reports, what's your analysis of that?
Well, I think that EPA was embarrassed by how long it took them to actually act, that it became a national and international embarrassment by that point, and then what are they going to do? Say that they knew there was no confusion right from the start? When I read that memo, it was essentially a get-out-of-jail-free card for both EPA and MDEQ. We don't understand our own law, is essentially what that memo said. So I just thought it was absurd.
Ms. Hedman, are you familiar with we had a hearing here in July of last year about you and your region. Are you familiar with that?
I did hear about it. I was actually visiting some Indian tribes in northern Minnesota when that occurred.
So did you get a follow-up? Did you read about it? Tell me what you know about that.
I did, and I was very, very concerned about some of the allegations that were made. And let me say, as someone who has been an intern here on Capitol Hill in the 1970s, and someone who early in my career experienced both sexual harassment and sexual discrimination, I have zero tolerance for that in the workplace.
Then why did we have 3 of your employees do a very brave and courageous thing and step forward and testify to Congress that you tried to retaliate against them for talking about this? That some of them were asked to remove the investigators. I mean, it's one thing when I get one person, but when we get 3 people testifying before Congress, putting their lives and their livelihood and their careers on the line, There's some smoke there, isn't there? You tell me you did nothing wrong?
I can tell you that I asked for follow-up to look into those allegations, and
What was the conclusion?
at no point did anyone ever present any evidence that those allegations were in fact true.
We sat here for a couple hours and heard testimony. There's some evidence there. I just wish you were at the EPA so I could call on you to be fired, because you should have never been in this position. It's so frustrating. And this is what happens. 99% of the people, good federal employees, they're patriotic, they're hardworking, they do the right thing. And then we get somebody who comes along, who spoils it, they're bad apples, and they just say, oh, I'll just retire. Full benefits, full everything. That was absolutely, fundamentally, totally wrong.
Mr. Chairman, I do want you to know that I appointed a new assistant regional administrator who has aggressively dealt with these kinds of situations. And I personally recall a case where we removed someone for sexual harassment, and another case which the Inspector General gave us very high marks for, where we removed an individual who viewed child pornography on a federal computer, and he is in federal prison.
Well, and there are ongoing investigations right now by the Inspector General, and this should have been dealt with at a much higher level. Let me go on to Mr. Walling. I need to help Mayor for some clarification. You became the mayor in 2009 in a special election, re-elected in 2011, but I honestly don't know what this means, but I want to understand. In your bio, you were the chairman of the Karen Gandhi Water Authority from 2010 to 2015. Were you paid or compensated in any way, shape, or form for being the chairman of the KWA?
I was not. I served as a function of being mayor. The mayor of a incorporating community in that authority serves, as does the current mayor, serves in that role now.
So when you become the mayor, you then get to be the head of that. And this, because one of the concerns is, are there conflicts of interest? Because essentially the KWA gets $200 million or so to start building this pipeline. And that puts you in a pretty powerful position to direct dollars and locations and knowledge ahead of time. It gives you essentially insider information, does it not?
It is a major project. It is a major responsibility. The chairmanship came to me through an election of the members of that authority. That happens on an annual basis. The officers of that authority are elected.
Are you here to testify again? I just want to be clear. I don't want to disparage you unfairly in any way, shape, or form, but I need to know from you personally here, did you benefit personally in any way, shape, or form from that assignment and that knowledge?
No, I did not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Edwards, tell me what DEQ, in your opinion, the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, what did they do right and what did they do wrong? Did they do anything right?
No. Honestly, as I sit here, I can't think of a single thing they did right.
Did the EPA do anything right?
Mr. Del Toro did everything every EPA employee should aspire to do. His memo could have made EPA the heroes here in this particular case, even despite the 10 years of allowing utilities to cheat on the lead and copper rule prior to that time. He realized the danger that put in Flint's children in.
And what's your personal assessment of what the governor has done or is doing now?
Well, unlike EPA, the governor has taken responsibility for what occurred. Certainly he was guilty of not listening to Flint residents. Certainly he was guilty of being overly trusting of MDQ and EPA. But at present, he says that he wants to be part of the solution, and he's actively engaged in this. And so I'm willing to work with anyone who wants to be part of the solution. I think he's sincere about trying to help Flint get back on its feet.
We're about to have a vote called on the floor. Let me, if the ranking member has another, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shirley, I'm still a little stunned by what you told Representative Plaskett. You said that you talked to the governor's office about our request for you to testify on February 3rd, and by the way, that was a joint request, Democrats and Republicans. And you said that they never directed you, the governor never directed you to cooperate with us, the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, and that they just told you to do whatever you had to do. Is that right?
Well, basically it was, to make my own decision about going, and because it was, as I said, an invitation, and I was not prepared to sit before this committee, I declined the invitation. And that was the extent of the conversation I had with the governor. But the subpoena that you're referring to, or that has been referred to, was issued a night before. I could not have gotten here physically to do that. And it was never served on me. So my announcement, basically that, I was declining the invitation, was in hopes that I could have enough time to prepare and to get here and to meet with this committee.
Now, you had said that you had some discussions, that you had discussions with the governor. Did you have discussions with Mr. Muchmore? Or do you know who he is?
Yes, I know Mr. Muchmore.
And did you have discussions with him about what was going on in Flint with regard to the water?
Not specifically. He was a part of some of the meetings that we had as we were briefing them on the progress. But again, this was all on the contamination issues prior to the lead leaching issues that we now deal with. But they were apprised of the progress we were making in converting from DWSD to the use of the Flint River during the interim while the KWA was being completed. Yes, we had those discussions.
Okay. Did it surprise you that Mr. Wyatt had told us that it was never brought up in the governor's cabinet meetings?
That is a surprise.
And why did you say that?
Well,
this was a major thing, right? I mean, this was not...
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that is a surprise. I was not a part of the governor's cabinet.
I understand that.
Yeah. So I didn't know what was being discussed in those meetings, and I can only take that as, a comment from a former employee.
Mr. Walling, do you have discussions with Mr. Muchmore?
I did on a few occasions, a phone call.
And was he aware of what was going on, in
Yes.
Flint with regard to the water?
Yes.
And so is it fair to say that you would have had more conversations with him than you would have had with the governor?
Yes, I did. I would call the chief of staff, and also one of his direct reports, Harvey Hollins, who is his urban initiatives director, was in regular communication with us, even as elected officials during the emergency manager.
One of the things that we concluded is that the governor probably did not do a lot of communicating in writing with regard to this event and this whole water thing and crisis. And what we were trying to do is therefore, in order for us to get the kind of information we needed to talk to folks. And that's the 15 people we were trying to get to, including Mr. Muchmore and I think the other gentleman you just mentioned. And again, they refused to talk to us. So hopefully they'll have a change of heart. I yield back.
Thank you. We recognize Ms. Plaskett for a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were concerned about this email, and I do have the redacted version for you and for your attorney. If you would like at some point to have a look at this, and you may want to make an amendment to your testimony after such a review, the chairman and the staff can make this available for the both of you.
We'll allow 72 hours for such clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a vote on the floor. I want to thank the four of you for your time. This is very illuminating. Again, our hearts and prayers and thoughts go to the people who actually live in Flint, who are affected by this and are going to continue to be affected by this. We look forward to the part 3 of our hearing with the Governor Snyder as well as the EPA Administrator. And that will take place in this room on Thursday at 9 a.m. We stand adjourned.
Okay, so there you have it. That's basically almost it's about 3.5 hours of testimony on the Flint situation. Man, all of the flip-flops and all the ducking and the dodging that was done in that thing, the Hegman and Early need to be acrobats.